Welcome everyone. Thank you so much for coming to the 11th Hour Lodge. If you just were here for our distribution panel, or excuse me, our finance panel, and you're here again, then thank you for spending so much time here with us. And if you're just arriving, then I would love to kind of give you just a really brief idea of what you're going to be hearing here today. So we created the 11th Hour Lodge as my production company that I run with the rest of my family, actually. For a few specific reasons. We wanted to make this a resource to independent filmmakers. And while I think there's a lot of great information out there in this whole kind of zeitgeist of the festival and indie world about kind of aspirational, maybe esoteric and theoretical ideas of how we can rethink our careers for the next 5-10 years, etc., what we wanted to do and the gap that we wanted to fill within the programming at festivals was really, how do we create something where people don't just walk out of here and think, how do I rethink the next 5 years, but how do I walk out of here with something that I can go out and I can change my project today for the better? How can I go out with an actionable, tangible, accessible, approachable, real life information, case studies, numbers, etc., and be able to improve not only one project, but the whole landscape of independent film as a whole. Because one thing that we really, really believe here at 11th Hour Productions is a win for independent film is a win for all independent film. And so with that being said, I want to kind of intro this specific panel today, which is titled Breaking the Gateway, Strategic Distribution. I've got some amazing heavy hitters surrounding me today, and I feel very lucky to be surrounded by them. But I'm going to go ahead and actually just hand it off to each of my panelists here to give a brief intro on themselves. So if you want to go ahead and give it up for our panelists again, just for being here. Amazing, and we'll start with Paul Scanlan here from Legion M.
Thank you. Yeah, happy to be here. So my name is Paul Scanlan. I'm co-founder and CEO of a company called Legion M. Show of hands, anyone heard of Legion M in the audience? Oh, good. All right. We're doing
pretty much everyone, yeah.
We're doing something right. So just quick background on Legion M. I'm excited
awesome.
for this
They're
panel.
super awesome. Everybody should support.
We have a project with Harvard Fund. Lindsay's amazing. So yeah, we're a fan-owned entertainment company, and our whole purpose is to try to do our part in kind of protecting an industry that we love and that we feel like might be threatened in some ways. And we're harnessing the power of the community to do that. So I'm sure during the panel we'll have more opportunity to talk about it, but just suffice it to say that we are uniting a vibrant and engaged community to co-own the company with us. We have over 60,000 investors in Legion M and over 300,000 people that are a part of it, and we are developing, financing, producing, and now distributing content. So
awesome. And then to the right of me, I have Michael Brown, who is one of the co-founders and the CEO of an amazing new streaming platform that is about to release called Shostak.
Thank you, Stephen, for having me in 11th Hour Productions as well. Yeah, we're excited to announce that we're actually going live tomorrow, Monday. Shostak is, at heart and soul is just about connecting storytellers with the audiences that actually care about stories. And we can get into the specifics on how that works, but it's just it's kind of surreal to be here and be talking about this product that's been, essentially connecting with so many people, creators especially.
Amazing. I mean, talk about tangible, same day kind of takeaway stuff. You're literally launching tomorrow. And then to the right of Michael here, we have Malcolm Brainerd, who is just an absolutely amazing human, but also is one of the two brains behind Terra Productions. And you might know them from a handful of their other productions, but maybe even specifically from Concessions, which has been getting some really, really amazing acclaim around some of the international festivals even. I mean, what you guys do is just so cool.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Stephen, for hosting an amazing space and for really putting a really incredible group of people together. And seeing a need and just filling it, and being the guy who says, we need this, and you're just going to build it. It's really cool to see.
Thanks, man. Malcolm, do you want to give a little introduction on like what you guys are doing, what you guys are looking for? Or,
Yeah, totally. I co-founded Terra Productions earlier this year, which is a first in development and finance production company. We saw great artists who needed people who would bet on them at a really early stage, and so we generally support films and film directors and auteurs at a very early stage. We offer development funds for directors who are at very early stages in their career, either based off of a short or a proof of concept or even a low budget feature, and really try to be the advocates that allow slightly more, creatively risky projects to make sense financially and make sense kind of in the model and kind of get there. And our question is always, as a filmmaker who is just starting to kind of get more engaged in the industry, how do you make it sustainable? How do you make this kind of a long-term run? How do you give yourself the ability to keep doing this? And so for us, what that looks like as producers is first in financing and development financing to kind of help those projects go basically from 0 to 1. We've got 2 films coming out later this year. Stephen, you introduced Concessions really beautifully, thank you. We're in development on a bunch of other projects that I am in love with. And again, just really happy to kind of be able to support projects that I think deserve to be made.
Awesome. Well, we're going to get right into the meat and potatoes of this one because distribution is, I think, a beast that a lot of independent filmmakers, I think it's kind of the linchpin for a lot of them. And so we're going to try and keep things really tangible and some cool takeaways from it. So our first question here is, distribution is one of the most misunderstood parts of the process, especially with where the industry is currently. Before we talk about deals and windows, what's the ultimate goal of distribution today? From your perspective, is it about maximum revenue, maximum cultural footprint, or building a sustainable audience for the next film, or maybe a hybrid?
You want me to go?
Yeah.
Sure. So, I would say, distribution is where the rubber meets the road. It's really one of the most important parts of making a film. This is when you get to get it out to your audience. And what I would say is it really depends on the project. There are projects that are probably more optimized for the monetization and getting a return on investment. And unlike a lot of producers in the entertainment space, we actually like to get our investors their money back, so they'll want to do it again. I think I heard Lindsay talking about this as well. Like, we look at film investment as less of a donation to projects and more. There are financially viable ways to make smart investments in films. And if the filmmakers and the team, the producers, are savvy enough, there are very creative ways to get those investors their money back. But I would say that there are just as equally many opportunities where the return on investment might come in a different form, and it might be an emotional return on our ROI. We talk about this a lot with our community at Legion M, and so I would say, I think hybrid was one of the options. So I would say hybrid. We had a movie that we produced called My Dead Friend Zoe with Morgan Freeman and Ed Harris. We released that last year. We premiered it at South by 2 years ago. Got a theatrical release. Was bought worldwide, Universal. Our investors haven't gotten all of their money back. They've gotten a decent amount, but I've heard from many of them that have said, even if I didn't get $1 back, I would be so happy that we made this film. And so I think the best case scenario is when you can do both. You can deliver on that emotional ROI and get them some financial ROI. One last question, or one last thing I'll say, emotional ROI doesn't get diluted. Financial ROI does get diluted, right? Like, there's only so much money that you can go. Emotional ROI is not finite. So you can have thousands of people getting emotional ROI from backing a project. And it's one of the reasons why Legion M exists, and is to bring more people into the fold.
Yeah. And I think that there's some really cool, overlap even. I'm interested to hear what Michael has to say about that.
Yeah, a distribution is it's kind of it's that middle institution that stands between ultimately creators who want to create something and the audiences that ultimately want to watch that content. It's an integral piece of the business model But it's also complex and complicated because with distribution comes obviously risk. You have to be able to understand if a project can make money. And so you get into this kind of weird space of when you introduce risk, when talking about a conceptual idea, a story that hasn't been made yet, oftentimes you end up in a space where you start to figure out, well, is my story worth telling the way I want to tell it? Or do I have to cater to a business model that essentially is kind of making it fit within an Excel sheet? And it's not always that case, but oftentimes when you have content that you want to create, before you know if it's valuable, you have to kind of figure that out for yourself. And so distribution is really it fits different boxes, but in 2026 what we're talking about is trying to figure out ways to kind of explore the different avenues that exist besides the traditional means of distribution, and so that all filmmakers, all storytellers get a chance and an opportunity to be able to tell the stories that they want to tell, and obviously make the money back that the investors are putting into the projects that obviously help, because the medium is very expensive, unfortunately, and so there's that portion of it as well.
Really well said. Stephen, I also loved your frame around, I really appreciated talking about emotional ROI, and I really love setting the goalposts around what success looks like. And I love sitting down with the director at a very early stage and setting those goalposts and being in agreement around what does success look like for this movie? What is the best outcome? And our job on the producing side, I believe, is to be good stewards of the capital, to advocate for our investors and represent the trust that they've put into a project, into a piece of art. And I believe there is also this other, more intangible quality that you spoke about, which is what is the creative success? What is the ability for that artist to be able to go on to make more movies, for us to be able to go back to the investor base and say, we did what we said we were going to do, we hit the target, it was over there, and we nailed it, with this strategic kind of release, this kind of cultural impact. Setting those parameters at an early stage, I think, is really wise, and I totally agree with that.
I love that just bringing in to hammer home the idea of just alignment, because we were just talking about this on the finance panel, of just finding that alignment of, a lot of times it's just figuring out what those other people are looking for. And then you can, once you know where the goalpost is, you can go and look and achieve that.
Well, and so much of it is about transparency and just being, straightforward with investors, and making sure that they know what they're getting into. And just as it was pointed out, I think setting those parameters early and being real transparent about it can be really key.
Yeah, no, I really, really love that. So the second question, I think it flows into that. So it's about hybrid models. So in a fragmented market, is the quote unquote, the infamous all rights deal still the gold standard, or should indies be looking to unbundle their rights, theatrical, digital, educational, international, etc.?
I would say, like any scenario, it depends on what your options are. One of the nice things about distribution is it's super entrepreneurial, and it can be. There are a lot of filmmakers that maybe don't want to bother with it and are just hoping to sell to Netflix and call it a day. But if you're willing to roll up your sleeves and get into it, and with new solutions like Shostak, I think there's a lot of creativity and opportunity out there to bifurcate the rights, or if you don't get the offer you want, you don't need to be stuck in the water. And one of the things I'll say, and I don't want to sound negative, but there are a decent number of distributors out there that are fairly predatory on, it's a whole supply and demand curve. Right now the supply is outweighing the demand for content, and we have so many distributors, and each one of those, we use this analogy of distributors are like a parking lot, and they have a certain number of spaces in their parking lot, and if your movie is really good, they might double park a few cars to get you in, but they can't double the size of their parking lot without changing their whole offering. And the challenge is we've had a consolidation of the parking lots, and it's getting tighter and tighter, and so there are less parking spots. There just are. But the demand keeps flowing, or the supply keeps flowing. And so I think we need more parking lots, first of all, and I think it's one of the reasons why Legion M exists, is to have a fair place to go, a filmmaker-friendly place to go to release films that's not predatory, but has, you know, a community behind it, so we know that once we wrap our arms around something, it's going to have some level of success. But I think, yeah, just in general, we need more parking lots. But if you can't get into one of the parking lots, you know, there are ways to park on the street, and you can get out there and roll up your sleeves and get really creative and go on tour with your film and do a lot to like recoup, you know, the financial, but also just to get the word out there and to find your audience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally agree.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting, this kind of repeat in history. Like, you know, if you take a look at distribution in like the 1920s to up to 1950, there was this kind of consolidation, this integration, this vertical integration of where studios were distributors, and then they were also the exhibitors. And then 1950 came around, and the government stepped in and said, you guys need to break that up. And then, you know, that's when distribution really kind of stepped out and became a viable business within its own rights. And it's done amazing things, and part of that process of distribution is curation, because, you know, everybody can make something on some way, shape, or form, but distribution offers opportunities for specific content, usually if everything's right, you know, good content, to get in front of the right exhibitors. But then now here we are in the streaming era, and we find ourselves kind of back in that vertical integration space where the streamers are the distributors and they're also the exhibitors, which is interesting. But there's also this business model that's emerged through social media and YouTube that's kind of just broken the mold, and it's given the audience the direct access to the stories that they love. But the only problem with that model specifically is that these revolutionary ideas, unfortunately, because of the way social media works, they're just not optimized for story, right? And so to be an exhibitor such as a social media platform or even YouTube, right, that's not really a viable business product for storytellers and distributors when the end game is to end there, because it's not really a place for stories to live. It's not really a place for audiences to connect on a visceral level. And so that's kind of that exhibition portion of it is the problem that we're still not, to your point. It's like, open up the parking lot a little bit. Let's find a new space or some new spaces to be able to show this amazing work that's being created, because there's so many great stories out there. So that's an interesting part of 2026.
Well, and the irony is the exhibitors are asking for more product. You know, they want the content, but the distributors don't have space for it. So there's kind of a gap.
Right.
And I'm interested, honestly, because it's really funny when I speak with some of the people on more of the investment side of it, which is almost like the opposite side of the coin, but same coin. Mm-hmm. But a lot of the conversation for that actually lies around the fact that the content consumption hours have never been higher, and they've never been growing more exponentially quarter over quarter. And so it's interesting to hear the flip side of it from your perspective of that, of, well, the supply is getting higher, but the demand is not necessarily because of...
I mean demand from the distributors. You know, there's not enough. I'm thinking specifically about distributors being those parking lots, right? Mm-hmm. If you want to sell your you know, you want to be released by A24 or Neon or Searchlight, well, most of them are full for this year. Yeah. Their parking lot is already full. So they're right now looking to buy things for 2027. Mm-hmm. And, you know, and that's what I mean, like their demand, it used to be hot and heavy where, you know, bids were, you know, overnight bidding would occur and, you know, things would sell here at Sundance, like in, you know, hours after it streamed or after it premiered. Yeah. But today it's like they take their own sweet time, you know, because they're not urgently trying to fill a slot that they have this summer. They're programming for next year.
And Malcolm, I'm interested to hear your perspective from more of the filmmaker side of this. And you guys are going through a similar part of that process on one of your projects, yeah.
Yeah, I have to speak to my experience, which is that all rights deals generally, for films at this scale, are not the best place for a film to go. Because, generally speaking, you as a filmmaker, having worked on that film for years, having built it and pitched it and framed it for the audience and for the, the buyers, really understand it. And your ability to take carve-outs on those deals, I think, is how you really get the most out of a movie. And I think there was this time, and maybe I'm young and I can benefit from not remembering this, but I don't know, when you could hand off a movie to a distributor, and that distributor would genuinely take it from you from there. And I think that idea that we had when, we were taught kind of how the film process worked isn't so much the reality anymore. The baton handoff happens later and later, and I think you are really, as a producer and as a creator, running the race with the distributor all the way to the finish line. And I think distributors, what's more, are looking for producers who will continue to advocate and ally for the movie, who will continue to, even roadshow it, do Q&As, engage with the film. And I think that, you as a filmmaker at these smaller budgets have a really good understanding of a very specific audience who will love your movie, who will show up for theatrical, and who will engage with you. Even if it is just 2 circles outside of your friends and family, you can do a lot with that. And I'm sure that there are great all rights deals out there. I'll be honest, I don't see them.
That's an amazing point. And I think, the all rights deals, while there is value in it, sometimes coming from a perspective of getting something made, especially if it comes in the form of an MG or something like that, it gives you the ability to be able to create your story, right? That's the conundrum that we're in with us as storytellers. But oftentimes, all right deals, they're based off of a number that's kind of coming from a business or a movie that's already kind of made a revenue, and they're not giving the product the value that it deserves based off of how it should perform. And so if you're a storyteller and you're taking an all rights deal, really think twice about that, because your product could be an amazing product, but you might be selling it or speaking to the wrong people who just don't value it the way that it should be valued. So it's an important thing to understand.
And I think what's interesting to I think explain from more of the finance side of it, and it's exactly what you said. They're giving you a value for your film based on what they are forced to be able to justify the value of the film to be at a margin of error that is comfortable for their fiduciary responsibilities. So they are not allowed to take the full value of your film and bet 100% of that value on that in most cases. Because if they did do that, statistically, they'd all be out of business. And then on top of that, they'd probably be getting chased around by the SEC quicker than they could even go out of business. So they have to take what your actual value of your film is and then reduce it to a margin of error that is so safe that they are able to actually make that quote-unquote financial bet on your film. So take that how you will. I think really, whether it's a good deal or a bad deal, whatever it is, that's what they're doing when they're assessing your film.
Well, it's 100%. And, if there isn't competition, like they're not competing with someone else outbidding them, then for sure that's where it's going to be. And all too often, I think filmmakers are feeling grateful to get an offer, let alone have competing offers that are willing to bid up their offers. And I think that's one of the dynamics that's really changed, is because there's so much supply, there are very few projects where distributors are willing to adjust their kind of risk tolerance to get it. There are a few, and they're the outliers, but the average, and I'm talking about average films. Average film that got into Sundance or got into a festival and is premiering. That's not an average film. That is a fucking kick-ass film. That's
an average, film. What is it, 1 in 16,000
That's the top
film?
3% of films. And distributors, they used to clamor for these films, and now they're, they'll make an offer. If it's accepted, great. If it's not, okay, good luck. They'll make an offer on the next one. There's plenty of other projects to go around. So, I think that's where this, entrepreneur element comes in, where you need to take your fate into your own hands.
Yeah, no, I really agree with that. So kind of going into the next question, I think it's almost like where that leads to. So, as an independent filmmaker, from that perspective, how do you view the usage of, let's say, like actual data on this? Like, how do you, whether if you're self-distributing your film, or not self-distributing, but all these different direct-to-audience kind of ideas and different streaming platforms, if you're doing that, how are you utilizing data and comps and things like that on the front end, and how are you utilizing that best on the next film? How are you able to actually leverage that data as somebody who is going out there and making that experiment themselves?
I mean, at Legion M, we love data. That's kind of like it built into our model. Like, we don't start a project unless we run it by our community, and that's data to us. And, we have a program called Film Scout if we're going to buy something. Our community is involved in helping us choose, and we believe in data to kind of inform decisions. I mean, there are people out there, and companies are run by this, that like there's one person at the company that they know best, and they're gonna make their bets based on that one person and their gut instinct. And at Legion M, we're more about democratizing that and really gathering as much data as possible. But I think you're right, and then when we are producing films, I mean, again, we're really straightforward. So we're always very honest with our community about here's a project that we did. Here's something that when filmmakers and producers are talking about comps, they almost always use the successful comps, right? And and the investors made all this much money, and we feel like it's so much better. I mean, I sleep better at night knowing that we don't always do that. Like, we don't just tell them the success stories. They need to understand. We have a video called Watch Before Investing, where we talk people out of investing too much money. And, and the thing about doing that is, like, you'd be surprised, it doesn't stop us from raising capital. In fact, I think it actually, I've never tried raising capital with the other model, so I don't know, if maybe we left money on the table, but I think in our scenario, like, what we have is we have people that know what they're getting into and understand. And I don't know if I said this earlier, but it's so much different to ask one person to make a multi-million-dollar bet than it is to ask thousands of people to make a few $100 bet. And when thousands of people are making a few $100 bet, you know what they want to do? They want to change the world. And do they want to get their $100 back plus $20 or whatever? They don't give a shit. They want to change the world. They want to swing for the fence. They're betting on Red 23, and they know that's a gambling. But so they know that that's what they're doing. And so when it doesn't come up on Red 23, they're not mad. They're excited that we got a film made and got it out there, and they had all the emotional ROI, and we set their expectations properly.
I really, really connect with that piece of it, because in building my comps, at least, I have the whole kind of data-driven aspect of it, and we use like a Synalytic and a couple of other things, which, shout out to Synalytic, fantastic if you haven't checking them out. But they, we have that whole side of it, and then we'll have our whole kind of the presentation side of it, but I always will include how you can actually lose money, because I had a mentor really early on actually who said to me that investors know, they want to see the full picture. They want to know how they can lose money. Every single person is an echo chamber in front of them telling them, here's how all the ways you can make money, and they've lost. If you're talking to somebody who has enough money to invest in film, then you're talking to somebody who's lost a lot of money.
They know.
In the past.
They already know.
They
You're
have.
not telling them something.
They've made investments that have lost money, and they want to know exactly how much can I lose too.
Right. Yeah.
And if you frame it, you can tell them reasonably, here's how much you actually can lose.
Right.
Because otherwise, the ceiling or the threshold that they're putting, the floor is at 0.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas you could actually help mitigate that risk and tell them, hey, more realistically, if you lose money, it's most likely going to be maybe half.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Which that at least.
That's fine. Yeah.
It's a little bit better than
it's
0.
a little better. Yeah.
Anyways, sorry.
But no. And I think the community aspect of it was spot on. I think when we're talking about data, oftentimes you got to look at what data you're choosing to pay attention to, because there's so many different perspectives of data. For example, when we're talking about, from a story side of things, like there's the data that comes from obviously the business portion of it, the data that can prove via comps that something was successful or not successful. But then there's the data from the audience side of things. And I found myself, while creating this product, looking at different IP businesses that introduce this whole other way of looking at data for me. For instance, like, look at video games as an example, right? It's a $200 billion plus a year industry, right? Because they're creating a specific story that doesn't necessarily rely on one-time consumption, but a repeatable entrance to this world that they created. So then you go, okay, well, wait a second, am I looking at the wrong data? And should I be looking at, board games are a $20 billion a year industry. People don't go, oh, I played a board game once, I'm tired of it. No, they're $20 billion because they keep on coming back to that same world because they created something that story lovers, storytellers, like they engage with. So when we're looking at data, it's important to kind of not just focus on specific items that you feel are just going to be profitable in your specific area. You got to kind of understand what exists on all sides of it, because there's a way to look at some data that people aren't necessarily paying attention to that can really bring value to what you're creating. And that can help you as a storyteller, not just comps.
Absolutely, I love that. Shout out to Legion M, of course, for asking fans what they want and then delivering it. That's brilliant. Shout out absolutely to Synalytic, which I think is a really powerful platform that I highly recommend, that has done a great job making very obfuscated data as democratically accessible as I have seen in my life. And I think that that's really important. So looking at past films for many years has been the best indicator, but of course that will never be perfect. And what worked 2 years ago when you greenlight a movie might not work in 2 years when at best your movie releases. And I think that it is our jobs to be really honest about what works in a marketplace, what worked in the past, and what we believe will work in the future. The challenge, I think, generally of independent film is that you have to be accepting of a degree of risk, because you are in a creative industry that requires a level of risk. And generally speaking, independent film will work when everybody goes right and you go left and you're right. And you will see this happen time and again. You'll see it happen with Brutalist. You'll see it happen with, Testament of Ann Lee, where a movie lands with an audience and the entire industry actually moves because they see a great success story. And so I think outliers continue to prove the most successful, and the best way that we can insulate our team, our protectors, and I should say our investors against that level of risk is to build a slate, basically, is to put a couple films together that we think are taking those creative risks, that are doing something that is new and interesting, connected as best as we can to past projects, but really focused on what we think is new and creatively engaging. And to talk to our investors honestly about the fact that we're going to do everything that we can to predict a market in 2 years and understand that it will move in ways that we cannot foresee on the timelines that we have to make movies. But by putting a couple projects together and diversifying those investments, it is a sensible thing to do, and we can justify it, and we can ask our investors to justify it with us. So data, I think, is the best tool. It's imperfect, and our ability to be able to take creative risks, I think, is what makes good movies work in that last 20 to 10%, I would say.
Yeah, I really like that idea of it, and there was a word actually that I was wondering if you were going to bring up, but it's innovation. It is risk, and yes, it's that, but it's innovation. It's a new story. I think where studios have to almost rely on, because of, again, their financial responsibilities, they have to rely on what stories already worked. I think independent film has to rely on what story is going to work. And that is a risk, but it also is how innovation comes for our industry.
I mean, that's literally the purpose of Legion M. You know, like when we look at the industry, I mean, everyone knows that the most valuable assets in Hollywood are the built-in audiences, and that's why we get so many retreads. And if you're owned by Wall Street, that's what Wall Street rewards you for doing, because those are the reliable bets. But if you're owned by a vibrant, engaged community of entertainment fans, guess what? You have two things. You have a built-in audience, and you also have a built-in audience that doesn't want to retread existing franchises. They want original, breakthrough, independent content.
Spot on, man.
So I'm going to ask this next question, and I'm actually going to ask if it can be answered in reverse order, with Malcolm going first on this, actually. Specifically just because I think the involvement of Concessions in festivals, that film has had in festivals, is really interesting. So it's about window strategy. And so how do you determine the optimal window between a festival run, a limited theatrical release, and a digital debut to prevent cannibalizing your own revenue? You're going through this literally as we speak, so I think the information is
Glad you're going first.
Great question.
It's almost like it was made exactly for you.
I got a caveat. Every film's going to be different, but
Yes.
I think those timelines have gotten a lot shorter. I think those timelines need to be shorter. The media space that I see, the ad space, is so saturated. Traditional ad spends have been on 8 or 10 month timelines, right? A movie will release a still, and then a poster, and then a teaser, and then trailer 1 and trailer 2. All of this ad spend with the goal of your audience hopefully remembering to buy a ticket months later, and it does not seem tenable, especially at a smaller scale. I think your ability to turn a movie around really quickly and put it in theaters is your best tool before an audience moves on. And that first ad that an audience member is exposed to, there should be an action attached to that, which is buy a ticket in a movie theater, engage with this movie now, not in a month, not in 6 months. And so I think we have brought those timelines down, and it is about focusing on that core audience and saying, especially as theaters become a more challenging venue, this is eventized. This is happening now. This is a cultural wave that you can be a part of. And if you don't see the movie in a theater, we'll continue on. But I think to engage with a faster media space, we do have to move a little bit faster. That would be my 2 cents. I'd love to hear what you folks think.
That was a fantastic answer, though. That's so really tangible for where we're going at right now. So thanks.
Yeah, I mean, there's not really much to expand on that. I think it was a phenomenal answer. I think that just, we don't live in a world where movie theaters are the only exhibitor anymore. And so I think when people expect to be able to touch something, to buy something, to hold something, to experience something much quicker, then they're being conditioned to believe that if I can't get it right now, then, I'll forget about it. And so, I mean, you kind of nailed it. I think there's certain times and places when the hype is worth it, and if you can build that up, but I think you have to understand your product and be really true to what that is.
Yeah, I agree. I think you also mentioned that every project is different, and I think so much of it depends on when you're releasing too, because the time of year and the actual weekend you're releasing factors in a huge way, in a way that if you haven't been through it before, you may underestimate how important it is. And really what you're looking at is what else is releasing, and and how am I going to compete, because every film that releases is basically a nationwide product launch. And if you think about that, that's expensive. And you're competing with companies that'll spend $50, $100 million. And one thing that I think is kind of interesting about the entertainment world is movies cost the same. When you go out to dinner, and you go to dinner and you eat a fine steak, or you go eat pizza or a burger somewhere, you pay a different price. And based on what went into, making that meal. And in film, if you're making an independent movie, sub $5 million, people are paying the exact same price to see your movie as they are to watch a $100 million movie. And so you need to be creative. One of the things, we just released a film with Bleecker Street. It's part of a new distribution strategy with Legion M, and it's called Fackham Hall. It's an absolutely amazing spoof comedy. It's basically Downton Abbey meets Airplane. And we put it out, the things driving it were, some of it was like an S5 deal that we had and the timing of that. But we put it out into theaters at an absolutely very hard time to independently put a movie in theaters, but it wasn't optimized for theatrical. We did over $1 million in box office. We're happy with that, but it was optimized for PVOD. And, that's a really, really interesting new window. I mean, it's not new, but it's pretty fertile right now. And if you're in PVOD during the holidays, and that was what we were the day after Christmas, we were, in all the platforms with the $9.99 rental. It was turned out to be almost the equivalent of a very successful theatrical release for us. And we still have our SVOD window and everything else. So there are just a lot of different, and I'll be honest, it was kind of a gamble, when we did it. And Bleecker had done something similar last year and had success with it. So a lot of these things are a little bit of trial and error. You're going to try some things. Sometimes it works. Thank God that one worked. And, but I mean, this is what the world is. You have to find your little cracks in the crevice and then, get in there.
And I think that traditional advertising nowadays, it doesn't just have to be trailers, and there's also this level of understanding that you have ways to engage with an audience that's never been allowed before because of social media and these other platforms that exist. That obviously, I mean, the real value is that they are in terms of advertising places. Yeah. So I think you look at a trailer and it might be a nice tease, it might give you what the movie's about, but by proxy of what that is, it is a sales piece. It is something to sell you a product. And today's audiences react a little differently to being sold to, right? And I think that, coming back to that answer, when do you start kind of approaching advertising? When do you start engaging your audience? Mm-hmm. I think you got to kind of understand what you're making, because there's opportunities to get them in on the process and get them invested in what you're creating so much earlier than the product releasing, as long as that engagement is emotional and it's not just completely transactional. Mm-hmm. And if they buy in on what you're creating because they're allowed to touch it, they're allowed to go on the journey with you, then we're talking about a whole different ballgame at that point.
Yeah, no, that's true.
I just want to take a second and appreciate those three answers for completely different reasons. The fact that we got a full-on case study, I think so much of us as independent filmmakers hear about this whole, you go to AFM or you go to the Marché or you go to one of these places and they're like, well, we're going to take your film here and then we're going to do maybe a theatrical and then we'll go PVOD and then we'll go SVOD and that's what your windows are going to look like, and it kind of sounds the same, but to hear an actual case study of where that worked and how that worked and what the risk was and everything, I think is amazing, and we need more people sharing that kind of case study with the world, because it's so helpful as an independent filmmaker to even hear. When you're hearing that from a distributor, you don't know what that actually shakes out as if this is your first time inking a deal with a distributor, but to hear that is so helpful.
Yeah.
And from the other side of things, even just to be able to talk about how that works with a film that from the very beginning baked in this whole idea of marketing through festivals, being a film that Concessions is a film that serves the film community so much. So if you love film, which you probably do because if you're here, then definitely check it out. But having that perspective, and then the other side of bringing up the marketing side of it, where it's people are kind of tired of being sold to. I want to actually point out a friends of mine that are doing some really cool stuff with that, Harpoon Media. If you haven't checked it out, they're doing.
Just had lunch with them.
Yeah, fantastic guys. Yeah. But also they're doing things that I just think that the concept of this is amazing. They're doing reviews, so they are getting film critics and micro influencers to actually run full, not ad campaigns, but organic campaigns that are actually moving the needle, and they're getting the data behind it, and it's working. Yeah. So just really thinking about your film from start of marketing and festivals to how that actually gets advertised to how that actually works out on paper. I think that this whole I don't know. I would just love for us to give it up for these three, because that in and of itself is the whole reason why we're all here. Is to get that whole perspective.
Can I just say one real quick thing that Michael had pointed out is when you're making your trailer and poster, and this goes back to the data question that we talked about earlier, don't be shy. A lot of times trailers get made, and oftentimes it's the director that is kind of, a distributor will try to peel that creative away from the director oftentimes, because they need something that's going to get people into the theater. And I think if you are a filmmaker and you're a director, I think be open to the fact that you made a film. You made the film, and you are like a filmmaker. And you should have an opinion on the trailer and the poster and everything else, but test it. If there are multiple options, go get the data. This is one of the things that I think is so, we think of Legion M as kind of insiders with an outsider's perspective, so we're very sorry if I sound negative. We like to pick out the things that don't make sense in this industry, because there's a laundry list of them. One of them is that we spend so much money marketing a poster and a trailer, but especially in independent, we don't even test that trailer. The trailer never gets tested. It's chosen by a few. Whoever has the loudest voice is the one that determines, this is the trailer we're going with, and we're going to put $5 million behind it. It's well, wait a minute. Did we ever even test it? Legion M, we can test things. We have a community. We can send something out Friday night, and Saturday morning we'll have, demographics. Well, thousands of people will have watched the trailers, told us, their age and sex and everything else, and which one they like, so we'll know. And actually nowadays, with the way technology works, if there's one trailer that works with men and another trailer that works, you can actually bifurcate that and go after it. So anyway, I think this data element and the new tools, and Harpoon, we use them for my dead friend Zoe. I think there's a lot of creative ways. So if you are a filmmaker and you're talking to a distributor, at the very least, ask to be involved in how they're going to market the film, and really ask for as much transparency as they will be willing to give you. Oftentimes it's really tricky, but I'm telling you, don't be subjected to them just putting you into their kind of machine where they do that. Well, this is what we did on the last film. The last film is probably totally different from your film. And every film deserves a curated marketing experience.
And I would say, even to piggyback off that exact thing, I previously, but still do, but have a good friend of mine that was in sales, or excuse me, in buying, the buying side for 20 years, I think, in distribution. And I was having a glass of wine with him or something on a rooftop. It was the most casual thing. And he was oh yeah, what are you doing with your current project? And he just kind of dropped oh yeah, just make sure you just put up 50% of the marketing budget. And I was what? He's oh yeah, just if you can, I know you're still in the raise process, you should raise to low enough budget of film, etc. You should raise 50% of the marketing budget and match. I was why would I do that? It's oh, you can basically buy the receipts now. You can if you're putting up 50% of the marketing budget, then you can actually have the right to be a part of the actual receipts.
You're buying visibility.
You're buying visibility. You're buying transparency into how your dollars are actually being spent, because a lot of people don't realize that when you get a distribution deal, you're actually getting a lot of debt. It's the most first position debt, and you're getting zero transparency of where it's going.
It's 100%. You're exactly right. And actually, that investment is the safest investment made on your film. It's last in, first out. This is a new film fund that we just launched, basically. It's the exact same thing, and it's really, really smart what you just said, actually. That's really good advice.
I mean, it was given to me, and that's why we're here, to share that. So our next question actually is, I think, a part of this. So as I think we can all kind of see that a lot of this industry is kind of bifurcating into almost two different sections. We have our blockbusters, we have our Marvels, we have our things like that, and then we have our micro budgets, full-on micro budgets. Which, again, I'm not bashing either one of them. We all have friends that do well and do terribly on both. And I think there's also this really, really amazing kind of middle class, so to speak, though, of this. I think a lot of people in the investor side of it talk about a really, really fertile kind of investment of this like 2 to 4 million range, or even, I mean, you could open it up to 1 to 5, but let's call it $2 to $4 million range. As that bifurcates, where do you, I guess, for this kind of specific kind of conversation of distribution, where do you see that having the happiest home, so to speak, or I mean, if you even just have ideas about that within the distribution process.
You look like you're ready.
Yeah, I can speak. I mean, I think that budget range that you named, Stephen, is actually kind of perfect for a high-quality film that can attach really cool, interesting cast, get some great performances with cool people out there, but you don't have to make everybody happy.
Right.
You don't have to show a movie to every single person. It doesn't have to have some huge theatrical run or some big sell for it to make sense. Most importantly, you retain a lot more control over a project when there are fewer investors. And that ability for a filmmaker, I think, to have more control over a project but still keep the creative integrity there gives them a lot more power in the vision. And I see even smaller movies making sense. If you can shoot a movie on less money and you don't even need me, I'm very happy for you, truly.
Yeah, it comes down to also a little level of sustainability and figuring out what your comfort zone is as a storyteller and what you feel that you can repeat over time if you're going to build a brand or a business model or an idea that's predecessor on not just one-offs but multiple. Because a lot of times I have colleagues and friends who want to go out there and create certain ideas and projects in a very small budget, and they beg, borrow, and steal to get that done, and it's phenomenal. It's amazing. You should be able to do that because it's your vision and you want to make that happen. But if you have to do that again, you might not find yourself in the position to be able to make that happen a second or a third or a fourth time because you've burned all of your resources. And so you find yourself just kind of figuring out and understanding, where do I want to live with this, and think a little bit about how you're going to continue this process, because I don't think anybody in here as a storyteller is just doing one film and then saying like, peace out, I don't want to make a career off of this, right? Like, we want to like figure out how to do this for arguably the rest of our lives. And so I speak to so many filmmakers when I wear that hat in my bigger budget line producing world, where it's like, I'm like, just think a little bit about what you're going to do with the next one and the next one after that, and have an idea of what you're going to do to get there. And that's kind of to your point, you know, so understanding that for your budget and what you're creating is important too.
Yeah, I would echo what everyone said. I mean, I think that range is kind of our sweet spot for Legion M. It's what we currently, in our current capacity, and I would say for now, we can reliably raise that capital to produce films in that, you know, budget range. But we're growing. Our goal is to unite 1 million entertainment fans to co-own the company. We have 60,000. So, you know, as we grow, you know, if we can raise $15 million for a project, then, you know, I think that's just as viable, actually. In a lot of cases, you know, the weird dynamic with filmmaking is that the probability of success doesn't change at a higher valuation or at a higher budget. You know, I mean, some of these movies, we have a movie in development, which is our biggest movie. It'll be well over 30 million if we make it. We're not going to finance that with our community, but it's something that we've been working on. We were called on by our community to make this film, and so we've been putting it together. We started by publishing a graphic novel that's been a bestseller, and just got an NAACP nomination. So, and we have a director attached. We have the screenwriter. Like, it's all coming together. But that'll be a project we pitch, you know, to the town, and, you know, see who takes it. But I think our ambition is to keep leveling up, and just keep going. We started at, you know, we made movies for under $1 million, and, you know, now we're making them in the 3 to 5 range, and gonna keep going.
I'd love to speak very briefly to cast, actually, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's
because
a good idea.
I think cast is the probably defining, you know, force around what the scale of a project is going to be and what you can kind of make sense on paper. And I have seen cast become more and more of a binary, whether it matters or not. And I think you are either chasing an increasingly small number of names kind of at that upper echelon that do really motivate maybe international pre-sales or theatrical showings. And that number is getting harder and harder to access because I think the number of actors that do move the needle in that way, both within the industry and for audiences, is going down, and we are left kind of with that upper crust. So I think the best approach that I have found to doing that is approaching actors with roles that are kind of out of left field for them. And we're looking at the work that they're doing and saying, how can I deliver this actor a role that is totally new and interesting for the work that they're doing? How can I take, for instance, a comedian and give them something very serious? How can I take a very serious actor and give them something goofy and not that crazy, you know? How can we do something that an actor gets really interested in and kind of come in and bring them a project that is an opportunity for them as much as it is for us and for the movie? And otherwise, I would really just focus on performance. And good, interesting performances is a great place to go.
Well, the other thing, just to add to what you were saying, which is really smart, is appealing to their heartstrings oftentimes, or finding something unique, because you're not going to compete with what they're getting from the studios. So you're really going to have to. They're going to want to do it, but once they've said yes, you'd be surprised how that dominoes into actors love working with other actors, and you'd be surprised. Like, we had Ed Harris. That was the first one. He wasn't like it took us a while to get there. But once we had Ed Harris, then we had Sonequa Martin Green, Natalie Morales. And once we had those three, Gloria Rubin, then we went to Morgan Freeman. And we did not think we were already in pre-production when we went to Morgan Freeman. And our director he was like, this is a waste of time. We're going to run out of time. We have to cast this. We moved all the scenes with that cast member to the very end, so to maximize how much time we had, and we were like the dog that caught the bus. We made an offer to Morgan Freeman, and his team came back, and first of all, Fred Spector, who's hilarious, is like one of the oldest working agents in Hollywood. First thing he said is like something really crass, like, that offer is total bullshit. Like, it's because we didn't have a lot of money to put. He's like, that money is not anywhere near what Morgan's going to need, but we like your script and we like your cast, so let's talk about it. And we're able to make it happen.
I think that's such a first off tangible, like accessible a case study of that, because it is so true. Actors do love working with actors,
Yeah.
but also even just in the current sense of this, I think, like, I've had so many conversations with filmmakers who are like, I think we could make it for this much money.
Yeah.
And it's not the question that should be asked. It's like, I didn't ask you how much you could make it for. I'm asking how much it should be made for.
Yeah.
It's two very different questions. And the reality is, when you're leveraging a talent that actually has a statistically saleable name that you could technically put up for pre-sales or MGs or something like that, you're now working with somewhat tangible assets in a world of IP that is fleeting.
Yeah.
And so when I'm talking with investors, I'm thinking, a lot of my investors, if they can put up $1 million, they can put up $2 million.
Yeah.
And if I can tell them, hey, your risk factor on $2 million is going to be a 20% risk, but your risk factor on this $1 million version of this investment is going to be a 70% risk,
Right.
they're going to give me $2 million for 30% risk every single day.
Yeah.
Every single day.
Yeah, I mean, adding Morgan Freeman was a no-brainer. Even at the number that, and we came to a reasonable, it was actually very fair with us. We had to fly him private, which was expensive. But, we also went out to our community and we said, look, we've got this opportunity. And what's interesting is that project started almost exactly what you were just saying, which is, the writer-director, we were really excited about the project, and I think he was trying to sell us, and he said, I can make this movie for under $1 million. And I have a great relationship with him, and I was like, but would you be willing to spend a little more? Because like under $1 million, you know, I don't know that that's what our community wants. You know, we wanna see someone, you know, interesting, and from a investment standpoint, getting Ed Harris and Saniqua and Natalie, now all of a sudden the risks are less than they would be if, you know, we didn't have them as cast. And of course his answer was absolutely, yeah, like, all right, I can make that work too, and it did, so.
Yeah. All right, so we're actually coming up on the last question here, which is, with more revenue streams than we've ever had before, how do you pick which puzzle pieces go where in the overall strategy? So I think I like to think about this similar to almost when we were talking about the windows, but now specifically with actual revenue streams, where do you fit those?
Well, one puzzle piece we didn't really talk about yet is tax credits. And you know, if you're filming, we moved our shoot actually and rewrote it for my dead friend Zoe to shoot it in Oregon, which was fantastic. And the Oregon, you know, film group there was just absolutely great to work with, and it saved us a ton of money. And we were originally going to shoot Morgan Freeman in LA. We shot everything up there, got a really nice tax credit. Turnaround time was really quick. But on the windows, you know, I don't know. Like, I mean, I think it depends on the project, you know, and depends on, I would say, like, one of the puzzle pieces that is probably, you know, one of the most critical to, like, start building early is your community, you know, and, like, uniting that community. And that can start with your investors, but if you have finance from something else, it can start by, you know, you just kind of in a, you know, grassroots way, kind of building community around your project and doing, you know, little events or things to, like, bring people out or invite people to the set. You don't want them, you have to be careful there because it can be kind of disruptive, but, like, it's also a really cool experience for people to go visit a set. I always warn people, it's so boring, but, like, it's a cool experience to have done once, and then maybe you're like, oh, that's kind of boring sitting there all day. But, you know, build that community, grow that community, because that's going to be, you know, a real asset when it comes time to release the film, no matter which window you're in.
And I think you guys have such amazing data to back up that. I mean, you guys put your money where your mouth is so much on that answer. That's awesome.
Yeah, and it's spot on. I think community is where we need to be looking at first and foremost in 2026, because community is probably the most easy, the most accessible thing. It's been more accessible now than it ever has been, and your project doesn't have to start with day one of principal photography.
Yeah.
It can start with your graphic novel example is phenomenal.
Yeah.
It's literally like within Shostak, that's the infrastructure that we're building.
Yeah.
It's allowing creators a way to engage with these communities and build that prior to investing in arguably what the most expensive piece is which is production and post-production and the marketing that goes along with that. And so I think that, like, focusing on that community aspect and what you can do to be able to share your ideas of the story with the people that you're hoping to connect to is definitely, don't wait until you're in front of an investor saying, please invest in my film because here's my vision. Like, you've had this vision for, at least if you're writing it, months and months and months, years before that, and why are you not capitalizing on that access to the people that ultimately will be buying the tickets, that are giving you the revenue that you're looking for, whatever outlet that may be at the end of the day. If it's the traditional means and you've got that community, then obviously distributors and whatever that is going to see value in that because you put the work in first. Or if it's just like you want to skip that and you want to access some of the modern day tools that get your content directly to audiences, you've built that community there, and you don't need permission anymore. You can just make that direct sale because they're invested in your product. So I think that that's something to look at as well.
That's extremely well said. Thank you. I think to speak to some very tangible examples of how Terra Productions has put community into its film model, you know, I think you can build films with this in mind, wherein fans and audience members can be your allies in this way. Concessions, for example, which we talked about earlier, is a hangout comedy, an old school ensemble comedy, and it takes place inside of a closing movie theater. And so it's a call to action around seeing a movie in your movie theater wrapped inside of a hangout comedy that's fun, you know? And so that's how you build a movie, I think, as an example of how can you create a call to action? How can you create something that itself is viral with other people? See this movie in your theater, go to your local theater, this movie is playing, check it out, and that's a great vehicle. Isle Child is another movie that we're releasing later this year, which is a Korean-American coming-of-age drama shot half in Massachusetts, half in Korea, about a young boy who is adopted and starts to kind of question his American identity. And that's an incredible cast, but it's built around this visibility of the Asian American audience, which I think we are still, developing and getting a wider kind of cultural sense of. But you're really, I think, thinking about how is the movie engaging people on something that they care about? And how can those people be advocates of your film as something more than just entertainment, as something that has a cultural kind of viral aspect to it? Very quickly on distribution and kind of the windows that might be overlooked, I think there are a lot of strategies and there are a lot of ways to monetize a film that may not make financial sense for a distributor, but you, as a filmmaker and as an individual, can justify them. And these are things like merchandise. These are things like even airplane rights. These are things like selling copies to library networks across the country. There are ways that you can do more with your movie that are generally overlooked and not part of the conversation because distributors are a little bit larger and it doesn't totally make sense for them. So I would keep an eye out for those, and they may get overlooked in kind of those conversations that you're having with a buyer, but they are worth exploring.
Guys, I have loved these answers. These have been so useful. We're wrapping up. I think that was it. I think we got through everything, and I'm so happy with the answers that were shared. We're going to be wrapping up. We'll close down, and then we'll be up at the front for a little bit if people want to come and talk to any of the panelists. But one more time, if we could just have a round of applause for these amazing panelists.
And our moderator.
Thank you, Stephen.